we've got a big day today. It's crossover day. We've got 40-something bills on the floor. We got to go to the caucus meeting and run through that. So I'd like to get out of here by 8:30 if that's possible. But hit the highlights.
Josh Russell and
Hit the highlights and move on. Don't go through a 10-page slide.
I don't even have a slide deck.
Nobody's
Mr.
here to
Chairman.
hear it. All right, go ahead, Spencer. You got it.
Well,
Commissioner.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to come before you this morning. There are only two items that we have that are beyond the statewide and amended budget adds. The first one is located on line 120.7, and it is for the elimination of funds for a CDL testing pad down in Hazelhurst. This is a project that is underway. We initially were funded $1.2 million in order to complete or start this project. We estimate the actual construction to be at $2,046,000. The reduction of those dollars would considerably put us at risk in completing that project on time, and certainly will not meet the budget in order to get it completed. CDL is obviously a high demand career initiative. We're trying to get more drivers. That's an area of the state that's been identified as needing a CDL location. So we favorably ask that the Senate consider adding those funds back in order for us to get that CDL center complete. The next item is line item 120.8, and it's to reflect funds that are being reduced, recommended from the House of $250,000. This was an ad late last year for our agency to do a PR campaign around our ability to issue free voter ID cards, and we have started that project, and we are have expended a little over $200,000 of that $250,000 in radio, TV, as well as some other marketing items thus far. The campaign has yielded.
How about digital media?
And digital, a lot of digital media. We have had 14,260,000 impressions thus far. So we've digital print, as well as radio. We're in partnership with the Georgia Association of Broadcasters, which gives us a larger reach for the dollars that are being spent for this project.
Do you see, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman?
We got to get out of here by 8:30, so we got to move
real
on
quick,
if we
Do
can.
you see any age group that's applying for those IDs?
We still minimal numbers. You have to remember Georgia is a state where most people have a driver's license or identity card, so we don't have large numbers. That number hasn't exceeded more than 60 in the last 4 years.
Okay, sorry.
That's all right.
But Mr. Chairman, that concludes the two items that are beyond the statewide ads for the Department of Driver Services. Certainly answer any questions that the committee might have.
Any questions? I hear none. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next up is the Department of Transportation, Commissioner Russell McMurray. We got to move. We got 44 bills to go over in conference. And I apologize for rescheduling this meeting from yesterday, but I had a conflict we had to do in LJ. Yes, sir.
In view of time, we'll go fast.
Yep, let's roll.
First slide you've seen before, and just to confirm on the federal level that the omnibus bill passed, which means now there will be dollars flowing to the bipartisan infrastructure law, which previously had been in the third continuing resolution, which means we can now start repaying ourselves for the state dollars that we had fronted to keep the federal program going. So this is great news, and will certainly keep things moving forward. I do remind you, though, when you look at this chart that you've seen for a couple times now, that this late passage of the omnibus bill has compressed our ability to authorize projects on our state budget year. There's only obviously 3.5 months left in our state budget year versus 6 months left in the federal fiscal year. So things are going to be pretty compressed to get those federal authorizations done, but that is great news. On slide 3, same slide you've seen before, and I want to say thank you to this subcommittee, and thank you for the appropriations that were put into the amended 22 budget for the federal Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act match. Obviously, the Senate put a robust number in, and working with the House, it wasn't quite as robust, but it still checks the box. That's why that green box is checked as it relates to matching the additional federal funding that has come forward without having an adverse impact to the HB 170 program that you all worked so hard for back in 2015, and we can continue to advance that. So that ultimately $106.6 million will go a long way to match the federal and keep the HB 170 programs going forward. So thank you very much for that acknowledgement and the hard work that you had to do in deliberation to see that through in the amended budget year. So I just did not want to pass up an opportunity to say thank you. And it will certainly not go unnoticed in advancing projects. If you turn over to slide 4, that gets into our 23 budget. This shows you the base, the increases, and what FY23 looks like from a revenue point of view. And over to the right, we just threw in amended 22 for a comparison's sake so that you can sort of compare what 23 looks like to 22. The biggest change in excise was an increase of $48.8 million. That brings us a little over $2 billion now in motor fuel. And I certainly acknowledge that number is staying the same, and thank you for consideration of that number to stay the same in the fact of the suspension of the motor fuel tax, which is certainly understandable and necessary. The Transportation Trust Fund, which are the fees, increased over the base by about $21 million. The Transit Trust Fund, which is the rideshare fees, increased over the base by $8.2 million. I'll come back to that number later. And state general funds increased $36.8 million, bringing the total fiscal 23 revenue number to $2.21 billion, just a tick below the amended 22. Over on the next slide is, again, the bar chart of where do the dollars actually go. On slide 5, the biggest bulk, again, go to our capital programs, capital construction, capital maintenance, and local roads admin at a $1.06 billion. That's the doing, that's the projects. The next biggest bucket is routine maintenance at $461 million. Again, that's what it takes to maintain the system. And then you can see the rest of the numbers. The general operations number is actually 5 budget programs combined. That's the people, if you will, that do the work out of the 5 programs. And then you can see the totals across the board. And on the next slide is 6, we'll get into the actual budget breakdown for FY23. And I'll just call your attention to the second column, which is the fund source, either motor fuel or transportation trust funds on this slide. The first thing we do is always take care of debt. The good news is debt has reduced by $36.5 million, bringing our debt service payment to $108.7 million. Next, you'll see capital construction increased by $14.3 million, bringing it to $911 million. That's again a good increase there. Not quite as high as last amended year, but very close. And next, you'll see capital maintenance. And let me remind you that you'll see a big add there at almost $4 million add. And that is to backfill out of the base where we used the coronavirus relief funds that were appropriated a year ago now, that we put those federal dollars to capital maintenance and took the state budget and moved into capital construction for the base budget. So this is restoring capital maintenance back to where it was previously, which was very important.
Keep it short if you can.
The next budget programs, program delivery, program delivery, data collections, departmental admin, planning, routine maintenance, and traffic management. All the changes are reflective of a couple of things. One was the cost of living adjustment that has been added into the base now, the GSEPs, the 1-week leave payout opportunity that exists, and other salary and retention efforts that are in the budget. And also, we've done an analysis and gone through the work to ensure that the right distribution of where there's federal, where an employee can charge to a federal program, we got the right distribution among the programs. So that's what all those other budget categories changes represent, are those things. On the next slide, which is slide 7, I'll just call your attention to LMIG, obviously a popular program. It increased commensurately with the increase in motor fuel at 10%, which increased by $4.8 million, bringing us up over $200.88 million for LMIG. That's about a 2% step up from last year. So LMIG program continues to grow with motor fuel, which is, as you all know, how important that program is. On the next slide is slide 8, and this takes just a little bit of a minute to go through. This is all dealing with intermodal. When you look at intermodal, you'll see that the intermodal was zeroed out at $31.7 million and then zeroed out and reestablished into separate modal programs, being airports, waterways, rail, and transit. And the reason for that is to be germane to the fund sources that fund each of those, because there's the Transportation Trust Fund and then you have the Transit Trust Fund dollars. So this begins to separate those out. So overall, if you look at intermodal, it actually represents an increase over the base of about $25 million from what has been traditionally our base, which brings the total to about $56.9 million for all the intermodal programs, which is good. Airport aid saw an increase from the House of $9 million, bringing airport aid to a total of $26.3 million. I'll give you the comparison again. The base was about $16 million, so you see that a $9 million increase. Last year, amended 22 was about $32 million, so we're a little south of last year, but still a big increase for airport aid. Ports and waterways, the biggest difference there in the change in ports and waterways was just dealing with the $5,000 cost of living, GSEPs, and 1 week payout. That's what that really is about, and some payment for Teamworks as well. And I might mention too, as you might have saw in the news, the Savannah Harbor expansion project dredging actually completed last week, which is a major milestone. Now there's still some other work to be done on that massive project, but the dredging, what really matters, is really is complete, which is really exciting. Under rail, the rail had some increases and some decreases. Increases were for the same thing: cost of living, GSEPs, 1 week payout. A couple of deducts out of the base from a previously funded project, $75,000 and $50,000 were one-time funds previously put in. One was for fencing, one was for some right-of-way clearing. And then we have, again, the increases for recruitment and retention, plus $10 million. So there was a plus $10 million in there to work on getting our short line, state-owned short line, up to Class 2 standards and trying to, again, get more commodity on rail throughout the state. So that was a good add there. Certainly goes a long way. The $10 million helps us, again, work toward that goal of getting all our short line to Class 2 standards, 286,000 pounds and up to 25 miles an hour. On the rail, there's still a lot to do on the trestles and the bridges that need rehab, but this gets us a long way toward that almost completion. Then lastly on this page is transit, and transit is broken down into two fund sources: the Transportation Trust Fund and the Transit Trust Fund. And you can see the distribution on this table of how much is from each. As I told you in the previous slides there, we had an $8.2 million add from the Transit Trust Fund, which now totals $15.9 million for the Transit Trust Fund proceeds from a rideshare. We have about $2.8 million going to the rural transit efforts and $11.88 million going toward all other small urban transit around the state. And Executive Director Tomlinson certainly can speak to that as well from the ATL perspective. And the rest of the transit was, again, adjustments to personnel, cost of living, et cetera. The next slide is slide 9, FY23 payments to CERTA. You see a $26 million deduct out of Transportation Trust Fund and a $12.6 million out of motor fuel, which totals a $38.8 million deduct. and that was really due to reduction in debt service. And then as CERTA did their FSTR program, there was a debt common reserve fund that was being able to free up. So you won't see those kind of numbers in next year's budget as a deduct, but this was certainly a correction and adjustment based on their FSTR program. And then lastly is the ATL, and to allow the Executive Director Tomlinson to something to talk about, he can talk about what that meant for the ATL. And then lastly is the recognition of the House for GO bonds for $2.96 million in short line upgrades. These, again, is the intent that we're closing out and we'll have the funding to address the rail and the ballast of the Class 2 standards for our short line. This gets us real close to getting those done. Now, bridges and trestles are still lots of work to do in the future, and we'll be back talking to you about that. The other opportunity that the GO bonds and the additional $10 million that was added allows us to compete for CRISI grants. We have already received word that there will be CRISI grant opportunity for us to match those dollars, which are federal. Those are generally a 50-50 share. So having these dollars in the budget allows us that opportunity, and we've already seen that Georgia will be eligible for CRISI grants, I believe in the tune of, I have to look back, it's either 5 or 10 million. Let me validate that, because that was breaking news as of the other day. But Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that concludes our presentation. And again, the last slide is sincere as a big thank you. As you notice, that is sort of a big thank you on the slides for the recognition of the amended 22 for the IIJA program and what your deliberation is here today to keep things moving forward. And I would say that in these really uncertain economic times, this is a very good budget and will keep us moving forward in transportation infrastructure. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Good presentation.
I know you're in a
Senator Beach.
I do have one
Go ahead.
question, and that is, first off, great job, great presentation. But under capital maintenance, 60 Minutes had a segment this weekend about how bad the bridges are nationwide. How much of this capital maintenance goes to working on bridge maintenance and so on? Not just, I mean, a pothole's one thing, but if a bridge is in bad shape and could collapse, we got to make sure we take care of our bridges. How are we doing on the bridge maintenance and bridge repair?
Well, I saw that as well, and a portion of the capital maintenance, a good portion of that does go to bridge maintenance. So capital maintenance is all things maintenance. So I'll get you the actual number, but what we have, and because we're going to change a little bit of it due to the increased federal now that's passed, we'll probably federalize a little bit more of that maintenance because it's a less stringent environmental work, and you get a leverage of 80-20. So let me get back to you the actual dollar amount, but it's pretty.
I know
robust.
a few years ago, Senator Gooch and I, we prioritized bridges, and I think gave you some extra money to work on those. Is that going forward and doing well?
Absolutely.
Okay,
We're
thank you.
making strides on bridges, but I remind everybody, bridges are just like us. We all have birthdays and we all got our own issues, and you work on them and they keep getting older, and you know, so it's you make some progress, and we've made progress as recognized by the American Road and Transportation Builders. I believe we're 47th in the nation as far as structurally deficient, which is a good place to be.
Got a question from Senator Ginn.
Real quick, one of the things that I know the House has been working on an overweight truck bill, said and when we put in a new bridge today, what's the design criteria for the weight of the truck?
It's based on current design loadings, so that a new bridge would hold more weight than legally, what's the legal limit now. That's on our system. That does not necessarily apply to cities and counties. They can design at different levels, and usually the substructure is the variable there. So we do design for greater than what the current load is today on new replacements.
Typically, that would run about what weight?
It should be to 100,000.
Okay.
All right. I see no other questions. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Next, we'll have the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority, State Road Tollway Authority, all the other ATLs, all the other ABC agencies. Is there any agency you haven't been involved in? Executive Director Chris Tomlinson, the floor is yours. Go ahead, sir.
I'm interested in the lottery.
You haven't run the lottery yet?
Not yet.
Stand
Haven't
by.
won it either. So,
There's
good
always
morning.
hope.
I'll try to help you with your time. If you turn to slide 2, I'll start with Greta. Greta essentially has a flat budget. The only recommended change for FY23 is the inclusion of $21,014. As the commissioner mentioned, that of course is just related to the salary increases and the associated fringe related to that. So there's no other changes to the Greta budget. If you'll turn to slide 3, the ATL. So FY23 recommendation includes $160,508 for that statewide cost of living increase, as well as $68,402 for the associated ERS adjustments. And then there's a small adjustment to our TeamWorks building in the amount of $8,882. When you look at that coupled with the base budget, you're looking at a cumulative amount of $13,062,237 in transportation trust funds to fund the authority. So that you know, this is related to basically adjustments to approximately 28 FTE positions with the ATL, 9 of which are associated with our planning function, and the other 19 with the express commuter bus service. If you turn to the next slide, the commissioner spoke about the rideshare fees. First off, I just want to thank members of this committee and really the entire General Assembly. The inclusion of rideshare fees and this dedicated source for transit capital funding is really going to put the critics to bed that always saying that the state isn't doing anything with transit. The state is, and what we've been doing is working with the commissioner as well as regional partners such as MARTA and others to make sure that this money can be available to maximize pulling down federal funds. So the state's right there at the table. Local governments still have some areas where they can step up, but we're working to make sure that those funds, and the commissioner is in his budget, but he mentioned the $11.8 million in FY23, and in amended there was $14 million that would go towards transit in the metro area. Slide 5 is just a reminder, in House Bill 930 that created the ATL, there was a provision around ATL branding, and by the next time the legislature comes back into session next year, all of the transit services that have fixed route service in the metro area should also be displaying the ATL logo. We're actually getting ready to send a letter out to all of them to make sure that they're ready to meet this statutory mandate, and if they're not, to let us know. Anyone who says they're not, we will make sure that this committee and the General Assembly is informed. But over the past year, we've been working with them, and we believe most, if not all, will be in compliance. Last but not least, on slide 6, let me walk you through the SRTA state budget. So the commissioner hit all the highlights, but again, the good thing is the numbers tie out. Reduction in debt service by $2,000. And on the next slide, you'll see where we are with our outstanding debt, which is primarily what we call GRBs, or guaranteed revenue bonds, and where we'll be at the end of the next fiscal year. As the commissioner mentioned, reduction of $38.8 million. Again, want to thank the General Assembly and the Senate. That was a one-time add that just ended up in last year's big budget, so it's proper for that to come out. But that was to park what's known as 1 year of the highest annual debt service. But last year we refinanced our toll debt with the help of this committee and the General Assembly. We got rates of 2.5%. It was a good rate last year, but if you look at where interest rates are now, it's a fantastic rate. And so we're in great shape, but again, that can come out, and those funds will be put to other use in the department's budget. All in all, there's a total of $49.2 million in state general funds. If you look to the next slide, you can see how that breaks out. The overwhelming majority, or $36.265 million, is for debt service, and the rest is for the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank, just under $13 million. And you look on the lower left, again, you can see what I was saying about the GRB and Garvey principle. So that debt service will help us pay down the debt, and at the end of June of 23, we'll have gone from $494.5 million in outstanding principal down to $434 million. And went through it quickly, but want to be mindful of your time. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? I hear none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. All right. Looks like last but not least is Governor's Office of Highway Safety, the great mayor of Cleveland, Georgia. How you doing, Josh?
I'm good. How about you?
Doing well.
Hey, my name is Robin.
Robin, good to have you here.
Thank you, and thank you for your time. I did make up a really brief slide just to give you something to look at. And I'm looking at page 5 in our section, beginning with line item 267.1. And it just shows on the third page, it just shows what the budget has in it. And then on the next page, it shows what the requirements would be for us. We are a small agency of, right now we have 25 positions that are filled. And our state budget is very small, especially when you remove the driver's ed component. And so I do respectfully ask that you consider giving us the money that we need to cover the $5,000 increase, the annual leave payouts that are an option as well, and also the ERS piece of it as well. So and I did attach a worksheet.
Thank you.
I did attach a worksheet that does give you the numbers, Keith and Chairman. So if you've got
Okay.
any questions, just please feel free to ask me.
All right.
But we are at a shortfall of $279,000.
In addition to what's proposed by the House?
Right, it's only 55 in there, and that's just for the, just 55 for the $5,000.
So what?
This is what the House has.
Yeah.
This is what.
Okay. All right.
And that's all from my section.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm just here to speak about the funds that were transferred out of highway safety into it says a new program for the driver's education. This just removes the funds from the highway safety umbrella and puts it as a separate line item for better accounting processes.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Yeah, just here to address the new, it says it's a new program. It's for driver training. It's not a new program. It just removes the driver's education training from underneath the highway safety umbrella for accounting purposes to make it a little cleaner. But it's just a continuation. That projection is $2.9 million, and we hope to get there. If trends are the same as they were last year, we'll probably be short of that and be here to address it in an amended budget in the future.
Okay. Any questions? I see no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much.
Hey, Abby, how you doing? Well, we're doing well. We have 4 minutes to spare, so if there's no other questions or comments, we will adjourn. We may get back together, talk between now and the time we get this report sent in, but if y'all have any concerns or questions of what we heard today, let me know. If there's no other comments or questions, we're adjourned. Thank you, Mr. Mullis, for being here.